I don't know if anyone's ever told you. You remind me of Matthew McConaughey.
No.
Yeah, I feel like you're just so calm, cool, and collected, and like smooth with everything you do. And I feel like it's just like a Matthew McConaughey thing.
Have you ever? I'm just gonna be completely honest. You don't remind me of Matthew McConaughey, but I do.
All right.
Yeah. All right, what's up, everybody? We're back with my first exit. I'm joined here today by my co-host. Today we have on Sam Corcos. He's the founder of Levels.
Oh, hold on. Do it again. I was close.
Hold on. No, brother. We started, and so Omid is late to the party, and he unfortunately has missed the beginning of the intro. Omid, what are you excited to? Why don't you tell people who Sam is for people who don't know Sam Corcos? He's really cool. If you're listening to this, you want to stick around. But Omid, why don't you tell them who he is?
Sam is founder and CEO. Co-founder and CEO of a company called Levels, the blood glucose monitoring. What is it? Solution? I don't even know how to.
Yeah, like it's like a little fucking patch that you put on your arm. But anyways, look. His company's really cool. Definitely check them out. And it's it's important it's important to monitor your blood glucose. But he's a 4-time founder and he's been on a lot of shows. He's been on Tim Ferriss, who's got a great episode with him. He's been on the Palm podcast. He's been in a lot of places. He's one of those people that is like a founder with really interesting perspectives on not just business but life, and takes this really principled approach to building that I've found fascinating. I had a conversation with him, I want to say 3-4 months ago, and in no short form, it changed my life completely. And so I'm excited to have that. Oh, look, Omid figured out how to message privately here.
I'm a beast. One of the most important things, at least for this conversation for me, is a lot of founders. I feel like a lot of successful people will share a lot of things up in the cloud that you can't really grasp. And listening to Sam, he's very tactical in the way that he approaches everything. And he's going to give us a lot of goodies in the way that he just structures his life. Even listening to him on that Tim Ferriss podcast, Tim Ferriss was like, dude, teach me how you're doing all this stuff. Cause he's like,
Tim Ferriss asked him to teach him about productivity. By the way, on a scale of 1 to 10, how upset are you that I'm not wearing my first exit hat right now? 10
out of 10, bro. I buy this guy my first exit hat so we could co-host together. And this guy just goes and represents a brand that's not even sponsored.
What's funny is that I was on my way to get my other hat until Omid just kept on talking shit. I said, you know what? Just for you, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to wear this hat.
Bro. He probably stood up and then realized the hat wasn't there and just sat down and said, I'm going to blame it.
That's a lie. The hat is here. The hat's in the room. I like this color today, man. There's something about me and turquoise.
Watch, I'm going to buy this guy a turquoise, my first exit hat. It's going to go right in the closet with the other one.
Knowing you, it'll be the same turquoise as that fucked up background that you have for this podcast. And
this is green.
That's turquoise, my guy. Bro, you have to change that.
Eventually, ladies and gentlemen, Nick will be moving to Miami, and then we'll have an in-person studio.
Yeah. And when if and then. All right, whatever. Fuck it. We're getting into it. Welcome, Sam. Mr. Corcos, how we living, man? It's good to see you.
Doing all right.
I think this is the first time that you and I are meeting face to face, man. I'm Nick.
Think so.
Good to officially meet. We've met on the phone, but I have a face for radio, and so you're definitely not good.
Great.
How are you, man?
I'm good. Let me pull up my notes here.
By the way, this is Omid, Sam, Omid. Omid is my co-host.
Nice to meet you, Sam.
Sam,
so pumped to talk to you.
Sam is our guest, Omid, if you don't know.
That's bro.
Hey, Sam, I was listening to a conversation you had recently, and you were like, you keep in touch with, you have a quarterly goal of keeping in touch with 1,000 people a quarter. And I was joking around. I was joking around with Omid. I was just like, I'm going to ask him if I'm on the list. And then I was going to tell him that Omid is going to do everything in his power to get himself on that list by the end of this 100%. Conversation.
He's a high bar.
Dude, he's going to pull out every fucking stop known to man. And he's just going to ask you at the end if he made the list. So I hope you're ready for that.
Okay.
I'm going to pull all stops on that. I really like that you said that, because I've done a much more mild version of that. Like, I used to work for Tony Robbins, and I would give speeches, and I would meet these managers and bosses. And what I would do is every time I had a connection with them, I would write them a handwritten note and I would send them that with brownies. And that was kind of my way of doing it, but I fell out of touch with all of them. So hearing that you do that is insane. Like 1,000 people per quarter, dude. That's amazing. And I mean, I'm not pulling my stops, but maybe I am. But if I wanted to add someone of your caliber to a list like that, how would I go about nurturing a relationship with someone like you?
I think an interesting observation just from my own life is that I used to have a lot more, we'll call them optimistic people on my list. Mm-hmm. And then over time, I started optimizing more for just people who I really cared about and who also wanted to engage in the conversation as well. And I just found that was a lot better. Like I used to, there was definitely a big chunk of my life where there were certain, like, we'll call them high caliber people that I felt like I really wanted to be friends with, but they were not interested in being friends with me. And I think just kind of accepting that and just saying, like, that's all right. So that's been a big thing for me, is just these things, they happen pretty naturally. And as people share similar experiences, for me, like some of my recent friends who have been added to the list are people that I play board games with in San Francisco. And that's just a shared interest that we have. And that's super fun. And like, it doesn't really matter to me what their backgrounds are. It happens to be a lot of them are tech founders, because that seems to be a crowd that really likes to play board games. But it's like these things, they kind of happen naturally based on shared interests.
Playing board games with Elon Musk and SF is definitely the vibe. I honestly, and by the way, Sam, I hope you don't mind. We dive right in over here.
Yeah.
So we're recording, and there's no need to hop on mute. If it's inconvenient for you, we have local recording.
No, it's all good.
This. But if you're more comfortable, then you totally can. Omid, you had a question about the CRM that Sam uses for this, don't you? Because you wanted to get back into it. Like, you're using Notion at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah.
Sam, do you mind if we grill you on some of the tactics behind the 1,000 thing? Are you okay with that?
It's so funny hearing you say that, because I've never heard anyone say that, but I was like, I really want to make this a goal to nurture the relationships, because I'm a firm believer that relationships are the true currency of life. And I created this Notion CRM to do it, and it was just so clunky and complicated. And I heard you say something like, if things are complicated, it's the enemy of execution. So something along those lines. And I was curious, you use Airtable. Like, how do you tactically manage that? I mean, to the point where you're like, I will check this every day, or, however frequent you check it and update it. Like, how does that work?
Yeah. I can show you. I can share my screen.
Hell, you guys bro.
Awesome. So let me just pull it up. Share window.
Bro, I'm about to nurture all these relationships. They're not even ready for the love.
Great.
All right.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah. I'm gonna pin it. Omid, it's probably helpful if you pin it to the screen, by the way.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
So that way you can get the full screen.
Boom.
Great.
Yeah.
Sam.
So this is it here. You guys can obviously filter out all. You can hide all the names and stuff.
Yeah.
But these are all the people that I keep track of. There's about 2,500 of them.
Wow.
It's pretty simple. I have built my own. The nice thing about being a programmer is that I'll stop this because I'm bad at multitasking. I'll jump back to that in a second. The nice thing about being a programmer is that you can build your own software tools. And so I have built from the ground up my own personal CRM, probably in the range of 5 times. And every time I do it, it becomes too complex. And then I end up with something very simple. At the end of the day, really all you need is a list. And you need some way of filtering that list. The challenge with a lot of these tools, is that people expect a CRM to automate their personal relationships. And that's just not how it works. If you use a CRM, you're basically signing up for a new significant obligation on your time. So like if you look at my calendar right now, I have 3 hours every week blocked off to just review my CRM. That's just one of the many tasks. I have a breakfast meeting most mornings. I host events in the evenings. I do a lot of stuff to make this a thing. A CRM is not going to help you do that. It can help you prioritize a little bit better, but it still takes time. Relationships just take time. There's no shortcut to doing that. So I'll jump back to the screen here. So I have a couple, it's actually just very simple. There are only a few labels here or columns. There's a person's name. I have their LinkedIn profile just because I have found I very frequently need to find people's LinkedIn profiles. So I just found it easier to add it. Email, phone number, which I used to have in Google Calendar. One of the CRM versions that I built actually was a superset of Google Calendar. Sorry, Google Contacts, not Google Calendar. Some description, affiliations, tags, locations. That's pretty much it. So I like to know where people live. These are where all the people live. You can create you can create a linked field in Airtable. You can also do this in Notion, by the way. You create a linked database or a relation, I think is what it's called in Notion. The specific thing that I found is helpful here is you can get way too nuanced in the locations. Like, do you need to know that they're in Orange County or LA? It kind of doesn't matter. So what I have found is I group people based on their nearest major airport that I'm likely to fly into.
That's really smart.
So yeah. So like, I don't need to know what city in Germany they live in. I would just put Berlin because that's probably the airport that I would fly into if they're anywhere near there. So I found that's really helpful. Affiliations is like what company they work for or other types of affiliations. And then tags are just arbitrary things that I have on here for people that I want to group. It's like, I want to know all the people who are interested in clean energy or the people who are interested in law or insurance. And I create a separate tag called Inner Circle. These are the people, there's only 20 right now. That's not right. I have a filter. That's why. Those are people in LA. 173 are the people that I prioritize. It's like, these are the people that I try to stay in touch with pretty consistently. So you can just tag people with that. Sometimes people end up, if I reach out to them a few times and they don't get back to me, I don't take these things personally. It's like sometimes people, when they have kids and their life changes, it's okay. They're at a different life stage, and maybe in a year, maybe in 5 years, we reconnect, and that's okay. I think these, it's not necessarily a static thing. It's got to be in both directions.
Dude, this is amazing, man. I'm so excited to go and build mine out to be as robust as yours. As someone who has, you're killing it in the productivity space. And I've been consumed in the world of productivity, YouTube, and there's all these different tools and things to use. I've used like Obsidian, Notion, I go back to Apple Notes, and then I end up back to Notion. What makes you want to use Airtable instead of just keeping everything in Notion?
I could plausibly do it in Notion. I think part of it is that Airtable was more flexible and simple when I started doing this, which was a long time ago now. And Notion didn't have a lot of the functionality for linking things. Mm-hmm. If I was to do it again today, I would probably just do it in Notion.
Okay.
All right. Interesting. I think that I once heard, and I'm curious to know what you're optimizing for here, Sam. And then I'm gonna selfishly change the topic. And I'll give you a pre-frame because there was like a conversation we had a few months ago, and I texted you after, and I was being honest when I said that you changed my life. And I want to tell you that story, and I was hoping to recreate that moment. And so that's a little foreshadowing. Sure. And so thank you for that. I really mean that, brother. So thank you sincerely. But I once heard that time is not the most valuable asset. People say, oh, time is the most valuable asset. I heard it was relationships. Because when you think about it, relationships are these things that will allow you to time travel. They'll take you 10 years back into a wonderful memory into your life. And they'll also accelerate you 10 years into the future if you meet the right person and you get the right opportunity. Is all of this optimization around relationships based on a similar insight and understanding of the value that they hold toward your happiness? Where did this all come from? Why did you decide to invest so much time and love into it?
Yeah, it was, there was a period in my life after my last company of a lot of reflection, and something that became really clear to me was when I reflected on all of the best things in my life, it was always because of a relationship of some kind. It was rarely because of some specific thing that I did. It was usually because somebody trusted me or believed in me. And now there's some degree to which, like, you eventually do have to deliver, right? It's not just the relationship that matters. You have to then be able to execute on it and satisfy those expectations, which in, I think, at least most cases I did. But building those high trust relationships, there's actually we have an internal company podcast that we publish. The first 6 episodes are on the history of levels, and there was a moment that I didn't even know happened until the podcast came out. Ben on our team interviewed my co-founder Josh to get his side of the story, and Josh told the story of when me, Josh, and Sal, who's a good friend of mine and an investor, went on a walk in New York. And we were talking about this idea for what would eventually become Levels. And at some point, Josh and Sal kind of went their own way. And this is the part of the story that I didn't know. Sal told Josh, like, if you can get Sam on board with this, I'm in. Because I've been trying to invest in him for a long time.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that story until I heard that podcast. But that's an example where I didn't become friends with Sal because he's an investor. In fact, when I became friends with him, he wasn't an investor. He was a law professor. And like we hit it off over a lot of interesting intellectual things. We went on a trip and hung out in Argentina, where we both very poorly tried to learn how to play polo, which turns out super hard.
Wait, hold on. Wait, was it water polo or was it real polo on the horses?
Polo on horses.
Oh my God. Hilarious, dude. Can you ride?
Yeah.
Can you ride? Oh my God. I feel like it's a wash if you can't ride.
Yeah. It was harder than I expected. I figured that because I'm reasonably coordinated, I'd be able to figure it out, but that is not how it works.
Yeah, it's not. I'm sorry to cut the story. Are you athletic? Like, do you come from a sports background? Is that your thing?
Yeah, I played a lot of sports growing up. I did rugby, football, and track in college. And then I did soccer and track and baseball, basketball, pretty much every land-based sport growing up.
Got it. So you're coordinated. And so anyways, what's the period at the end of that story? I totally cut you off.
Yeah, I think it's at the end of the day, when you look at each of these moments where positive things happened, it was always, none of them would have happened if I had not built those high trust relationships that really took years to develop. And it wasn't built with the intention of like, oh, I'm going to be friends with this person so that I can X. It was more like I felt a genuine connection with somebody. And it's like, this is a relationship that it makes my life better. And so I'm going to focus on this. And I think they feel similarly. So
wow.
The number of times that those sorts of things have turned out to be life-changing and positive in a totally unexpected way is really hard to count.
I have the opportunity to interface with so many ad buyers internally from teams, and Jackie is on her P's and Q's, mate. And she's the easiest to deal with out of any of them. And so she's an all-star, and I've surely let her know. Anyways, long story short, I'm texting Sam, and I have this client, Peter, who I produce this podcast for. And Sam is the founder of Levels. What I didn't know is he was in the middle of a raise, meaning for anybody listening, he's raising money, which is historically a fairly busy time for founders. And so we're going back and forth, or we're missing each other. And he texts me and he says, "Hey brother, I got the next 2 hours open. If you have time, you're free to give me a call." And I was surprised to see his text. I was like, wow, this was like 2 weeks later. I didn't think I was going to hear back. And I was free. I was at the barber. I was waiting for my cut. And so I said, let me give him a shout. So I give him a shout. It was our first time meeting. I said, "Hey, Sam, thanks so much for making the time. My name is Nick. I'm Peter's producer. It's really nice to meet you." He said, yeah, that's fine. And I said, I know you're really busy because you're in the middle of a raise. And you paused and you said, "I'm not busy." And then it took me by a shock because no one says that in today's, I have yet to get that response. So I replied to you and I said, "Oh, I've just never met a founder that didn't have their head turned on backward, especially in the middle of a raise." They're trying to pry almost because I was so blown away that you said you weren't busy. And you replied, "Seriously, I think I'm not busy like 80% of the time."
Yeah.
And I just said, "Sam, is it okay if I ask you a personal question? This has nothing to do with why I called. Do you have time?" And you said, "Dude, I literally just said I wasn't busy." and so I went on to ask you, I said, how the hell are you not busy? How has that come to be for you? Because, I've worked in startup environments for a really long time, serving as creative directors, brand marketers, producers, etc. And you went on to, not ruin the story, but the long story short is you said, "Had you heard of the Eisenhower matrix?" I said, "The Eisenhower what?" And you said, basically, there's a quadrant of important and non-urgent. I said, "Oh, the important, urgent quadrant thing." And if you're listening to this, just type in important, urgent quadrant and you'll see what I'm talking about. And you basically said, the TLDR is this in 30 seconds. You said, "Nick, I realized a long time ago that all the stuff that moves the needle forward is the stuff in the stuff in the important, not urgent category. Every single time I do that, it moves the business forward and everything else can basically wait. A lot of urgencies are fake. People think things are urgent. They're generally not. I take a lot of time throughout the week. I focus on the non-urgent important work, and things move forward for my business." Mate, like that small conversation changed my life. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was that I needed permission to do this and I needed permission from somebody in a similar space that was ahead of me. And so sincerely, brother, thank you for that, because I couldn't tell you, that was the demarcation line for when I stopped burning out and I could start living life again. And so like I tip my cap to you in all sincerity. And I wanted to riff on that if you are okay with it. Can you bring to light your philosophy? Do you have a clear philosophy on this, or was that a moment in time that you want me to recount for you a little bit more?
No, I totally hear that. And it's a conversation I have a lot with friends of mine who are founder CEOs. It's a common thing. They're always busy. And I think this is probably a controversial statement, but I think busy is a choice. You can choose to always be reactive to things, or you can choose to have your priorities straight and focus on what's important to you. When somebody says, "I can't do it, I'm too busy," it really either means one of two things, which is they don't have their shit together, just in general, or two, this is not a priority for them. So like if you've maybe, I'm usually pretty direct in my communication. I rarely will say, "Sorry, I can't, I'm busy." And Jackie will also say this, like some of the podcasts that we've declined recently, it's like, we don't say, "Sorry, we're too busy, we can't do podcasts." It's more like, "Sorry, this is not currently on our roadmap and we are not prioritizing this right now." Right? That's not the same thing as saying like, "Oh, I'm just busy." Because busy is almost like, it's almost like you're accepting that the world is happening to you. Like you're the passenger, not the driver. It's like, I'm just so busy. All these things are happening to me and I can't control my own life. But if you view it from the other perspective, another thing that I say to our team often is, don't let recency determine your priority. This ties into the Eisenhower matrix.
Wow.
Just because somebody says like, "Hey, I need you to do this in the next 24 hours. We had a very specific example. There was a reporter from the Washington Post who sent us an email and said, "Hey, we're writing the story. We need you to get back to us in 24 hours. And in the past, this would have put our whole team in a frenzy. Like, "Oh my God, we have to stop everything and do this." But we're now pretty well trained in this, where we look at our priority list And media was a priority like 2 or 3 years ago. Getting another media placement in the Washington Post, it's just like, it's not a priority. So we said, no thanks. And that's it. It's not our priority. It was a part of our strategy a few years ago. It's just not right now. And so most people, a lot of the CEOs I know, they live in their cell phones and they live in text messaging. They're super reactive. It's like everything's on fire all the time. They always need to respond to everything. They've always got to have their phone on them. But that's not how it needs to be. And it's usually the wrong way to be. So I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but that's, I think, a big part of it.
That I know Omid is mincing thoughts, and I want to go to him because I know we talked about this beforehand. And I've actually recanted that story to a few friends just because I couldn't really capture the insight without just sharing the story. And the reaction is just, oh my gosh. That was incredible, by the way. What I took from that, and what I also took from our conversation a few months ago, was what you just said. And you said something to the tune that made me believe that a lot of things that are urgent they just seem urgent. They're not actually urgent. And so if you test them, you realize that there's really not a lot of downside into just letting go. And the downside might look like a small slap on the wrist, a small, hey man, I thought you were going to get that done. If that, sometimes it's non-existent. And we live in this world where we're always, I think, reacting to urgent things instead of responding. And so how do you feel that way? This is kind of Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week stuff. Like, the urgent stuff is really fake urgency in a lot of situations. And I think in the Eisenhower Matrix, it literally says delegate it. I think there should be an addition that says just forget about it too, because a lot of urgent stuff you can forget about. So how do you treat this urgent category? Because what I've been fighting is people pleasing, because ultimately what you end up doing is people pleasing. Have you fought that? Have you encountered that? Is that a thing for you? How do you treat these things that seem urgent and aren't, especially on the days that it's hard, that you actually feel like, oh, this really does feel urgent? How do you go about that, Sam?
There definitely are things that are urgent that come up, but they're just a lot less frequent than people expect. Like I was talking to Mike Haney, who's our editorial director, about this because we had a fire drill, like a thing. It's like, hey, everyone, drop what you're doing. I need this done by the end of day so that we can send it to these people. And he made a comment along the lines of, I've been here for 3 years, and I think this is the second time that this has happened. And it's not going to be zero. Like, there are times when it's like, hey, this thing came up, this is actually important, and it aligns to our priorities. Whatever else you're doing should stop, because this is both important and high urgency. Let's get this done. But there's this really interesting thing. What was that book that I read? Somebody wrote a book. Was it Severs? He wrote a book about, it was like 25 conflicting pieces of life advice, which is like, it's a really funny book because he starts with like, the best way to live your life is X. And then chapter 2 is the worst way to live your life is X. And they're both equally plausible. It's a really interesting read. And when I tell people, me as the CEO, it's like, actually, I'm not particularly stressed out, and very little of what comes my way is urgent. And it's like, well, that's just because you're the CEO. And so you can control your time however you want. And if I was telling the opposite, it's like, well, my life is pretty chaotic because I'm the CEO. So like, I'm always on my phone. Everything. They're like, oh yeah, that makes sense because you're the CEO. So it can go whichever way you want. You have a lot more control over these things than you expect. I think one interesting example, and actually bringing Jackie into this picture, is I also struggle with the people pleasing part of it. And so, for example, I have a really hard time saying no to things. Like, I get invited to go on podcasts, and a lot of them I just don't want to do. And instead of me saying no, I just say, hey, let me loop in Jackie. She makes the call on these things. And then Jackie politely declines.
Oh my God.
Because she does not have an issue saying no. And so I let Jackie make the decision. Some tiny part of it is Jackie will research the podcast to see, is this is this aligned with our goals? But mostly it's just so I don't have to feel weird about people pleasing and saying no to things. And she's just better at it than I am. So sometimes having that separation really helps and coming up with systems around it. There was one thing that you said that I'm curious to maybe get some specifics on, which is you said sometimes it's okay to not do things and then get like a slap on the wrist for it. I'm curious what you meant by that.
Yeah, I'm happy to explain. And so my experience is that some of the things that seem urgent and quote unquote important, they're A, not important to me because they're not my priority. And B, they're urgent not for me, they're urgent for someone else. And so if I forego doing them, my observation is that one of two things usually happen. It's that nothing happens, is what often happens. Nothing happens. The second thing is that somebody will mention something and they'll say, hey, I thought that you were going to get this done, etc. I asked you to do it. And then I just politely talk them through it. I let them know I wasn't coming from a malicious place. I was prioritizing something else. I'm happy to get it done at this time. That rarely happens to me. What's interesting is that what I think would happen before you and I had that conversation was much different. I thought it was going to have a catastrophic result. Catastrophic in the sense I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get chewed out, I'll lose the book of business, etc. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that clarifies it a little bit. So I'm just making some ginger tea.
Yeah. That's fine, man. Make it away. Yeah. I love it. Is that the Levels office, by the way, or is that your place?
Yes to both.
Nice.
we're a fully remote team, so
yeah,
this is also the Levels office.
Sorry, I think I asked you this at the beginning. Where are you based? You're in SF, right?
I'm in San Francisco these days. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really nice place in SF, man.
Yeah, it's a friend's house.
Yeah,
it's good.
I love it. Anyway, sorry to derail you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree with your assessment.
Talk to me.
So I think it's really important to set clear expectations, especially for people on your team. One of our cultural values, I did a podcast with my co-founder on this. What we often tell people is a lack of communication is a lack of performance. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's not this like peripheral thing that you're supposed to do. It is your job is to communicate. We've had specific examples where this is especially true when you're remote, but we've had specific examples where people have said like, well, I did my job right, I just didn't communicate well. Like, no. A lack of communication is a lack of performance. You did not do your job well because you did not communicate. A lot of people see it again as this like, it's a secondary skill. It's not core to their job, but that's just incorrect. So I think when it comes to things like somebody on your team says, hey, I need you to do this thing by tomorrow. The way that we would see this done at Levels is you might say, actually, I can give you some really good specific examples of people on our team who have done this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would love that.
Where if I tell somebody on our team, hey, I need you to do this thing by Friday, the answer is not like, I can't, I'm busy, right? Because like we all have the same amount of time. This is another thing that I often hear people say, I don't have time for that. It's like, actually, you have the same amount of time as everybody else. We've all got the same amount of time. You just have different priorities, and that's okay. But don't pretend like you just don't have time to do this. Mm-hmm. So a really good way that I've seen this done on our team is people will say like, cool, I can do this by Friday, but here are my 5 priorities in order. And if I'm going to do this for you, these 2 are not going to get done.
Wow, that's really good.
Dude, that is okay. No, go ahead. It looks like you were going. Yeah, please. Yeah.
And that gives you visibility. I would say 3 out of 4 times, the way that ends up happening is somebody on our team will tell me that, and I'll say, oh, yeah, you're right. Never mind. How soon can you have this done? And they'll say, I can have it done next Wednesday. And they say, all right, that's too long from now. Let me talk to somebody else and have them do it because they might have more capacity. As opposed to just ambiguously dropping the ball. But also it makes it super clear. Like if they ask you to do it and then you do, but then you drop these other balls, they can't get upset with you, because when you're communicating well, you're saying, look, these are my priorities. From what I'm gathering, based on what we've talked about in the past, this actually is not my priority. Do you agree or disagree? And then maybe there's some context that you're missing, that this thing is actually the highest priority. But that's where the communication gap can happen. So I think just being really explicit is super important, and not just ambiguously dropping the ball.
I know, because Omid and I have a chat while we do these, and he's like, dude, I have a question for Sam. So Omid, I'm going to pass it to you. It's really timely, but I want to say thank you. I think I've just gotten used to and okay, and you're right, Sam, to call it out, to ghosting people. It is not okay to ghost people, especially as a leader, and just drop the ball and ghost them. That's not okay. Message people back. And I don't like using this term, but people say it, I'll use a different term that I do like. You teach other people how to treat you. And so over time, your team learns, oh, Nick just has priorities, and the things I'm asking of him, I know what he's going to say, and he probably has his stuff together, and they begin approaching you about it differently, and you start getting less and less of those requests. So you've changed my mind on this. Thank you. This is the perfect segue to Omid, because I know he had a case specific issue about this. Omid, did you want to share? As much as you can, honestly, without getting yourself in trouble.
All right. So I'm an account executive. I'm in corporate America, as you can say. But I was listening to your podcast with Tim Ferriss, and I mean, similar to you, the 4-Hour Workweek completely changed my life. When I was younger, I read it, and I've been chasing that dream of the 4-Hour Workweek. And I went down the path of virtual assistants. I have 2 virtual assistants right now that help me with a bunch of things that whatever I want to do or pursue. I have my virtual assistants help me, and I've been a real big proponent of delegating. And I mean, I love using Loom. I heard in your Tim Ferriss podcast that you use it all the time. It's my favorite tool. I literally just was teaching my mom how to fix her resume on Loom yesterday. So big fan of that. What's interesting though is now being in corporate America, I don't know how to systemize and automate a lot of the stuff that I do. So I find myself doing a bunch of dumb shit that I don't have to do, that doesn't really move the needle forward, especially being an account executive. Yeah. And we're at a security company, so everything is like multi-factor authenticated and all this. So for those that are in a situation, I know like you're CEO, and I know you have some people in your team where you give them VAs as well with Athena. How does it work for folks like myself in a corporate America situation where we know we're not using the best use of our time?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously way harder. So I think you can probably start with that. Like if the people that you work for say you can't use these tools and you have to do it yourself, I could just give some specific examples for us at levels. Yeah. We're often fighting the opposite, which is people always feel like they need to do it themselves. And so I'm always trying to push people, like, you don't have to do it yourself. You can delegate this. A lot of that comes from people who worked at other companies where if they delegated something, they would get fired. It's like, no, this was your job. Your job is to do this thing, and you're not doing your job. And it's like, no, my job is to make sure that this thing gets done, and it is getting done. And now I'm way more productive because I can do other things. But do I personally need to be the person to fill out the TPS report every time? And a lot of companies, the answer is yes. Like, you personally have to do it. And if you don't, you're fired. So that's a big challenge. I think from what I've heard, a really good strategy for this is to always frame these things in terms of an experiment. Like saying things like, hey, I'm thinking about, instead of doing this update meeting every week, what if we experiment for a week? Or maybe for 2 weeks, and we do this with a Loom instead, and see if we like that better. And if not, we can just go back to the way it was, and that's fine. It's no harm, no foul. So always trying to chip away at these things very slowly. Most companies are okay with running very small experiments.
Wow. And
then what will often happen is, like, people just immediately realize how much better it is, and then they don't want to go back.
That's amazing. That's really great feedback.
What do you think of? Let me build on that for a sec. Yeah. Cal Newport said, do you know who Cal Newport is?
Yeah, sure.
He said he recently wrote a book, and I forget the name of it.
Slow Productivity. That was his most recent book.
That's it. And he was talking about how to implement this in corporate America, similar philosophies to what we're discussing. And the first thing he said is don't ask for permission. Just do it. And obviously within reason. Don't, start hiring VAs internally and stuff. Like the access documents that are confidential. But there's probably a lot that you can do between a VA or Loom and not do at the same time. Do you believe in that? The not asking for permission model, does that resonate with you?
I think where that philosophy falls short, this is maybe like a broader critique of corporate America, but there's this other really good book, Bullshit Jobs. I don't know if you know that one.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah. The problem is that most jobs do not reward you for better, higher quality output. They reward you for coloring in the lines. A lot of people that I talk to quite literally believe that their job is to keep their green status icon green on Slack. Just like always make sure that it's green. Always make sure that none of your channels are bold. Like that's just your job. Play whack-a-mole on Slack all day, and then like you have done work. You have done job today. And the idea that there is some work output that is expected that is beyond that is utterly lacking, especially as you get to larger companies where your ability to directly point to some deliverable that added value is nearly impossible. So the whole game changes from how do I deliver value to how do I convince my boss and my peers that I have delivered value, which is a totally different game. There's a seemingly viral post from Paul Graham that just has been going around recently related to a talk that Brian Chesky gave around founder mode. And it's very related to this concept, which is the larger these companies get and the more managers there are, the less direct the value add is that you can actually attribute to people. And so you end up with basically promoting people who are really good at convincing you that they're adding value. Whether or not they are, it's completely irrelevant. It's harder to get away with at a startup just because these cycles are so short. It's like at the end of the day, there's only so much money in the bank and you're either winning or you're losing. But when you're at a larger company, you can get away with that pretty much forever. So I bring all that to say, do I think just doing it, asking for forgiveness rather than permission, it's tough because let's say you do, and then you do double your output, you triple your output, you 10x your output. Nobody cares. All they see is that you broke the rules. And that's what you're going to get punished for.
Damn.
Man, corporate America is definitely something. I feel like when you're in a position like yourself where you're a founder and you can actually build, is definitely the place that both Nick and I do want to get to eventually. And so I guess here's a question I have. How would you kind of manage your time? And I'm guilty of saying I'm busy because I have my job, which I'm committed to. And then I also want to build on the side. So I wake up super early and knock out like from 5 to 9, also take care of my health. How do you, I guess, build while having a full-time job and not be busy? Like how does that? The
answer is being really intentional with how you spend your time and being really clear on what your priorities are. So for me, very tactically, I have found that intraday context switching is really, really hard for me.
Yeah.
If I'm a software developer by background. So for me, I can't work in like 2-hour blocks. It just doesn't work that way. It's going to take me 2 hours just to start getting into the flow of what I'm doing. And it's like, I have a few hours of calls and then I'm going to go back to coding and then get on calls and then like do email. It's like, no way, it's never going to happen. So I try to stack all my meetings on Monday. Really Monday and Friday are kind of my days where I'll do meetings, mostly on Mondays. If you were to see my calendar, you'd see that it's stacked from like 8 a.m. until like 6 p.m. Every 30-minute increment is another meeting. And I just try to knock them all out as fast as I can. So that for the rest of the week, I'm just open. Like, from conversations that I've had, this is pretty unusual for CEOs, but usually all day Tuesday and all day Thursday are just completely open.
Wow.
They're just completely open. And I'll figure out what I want to do. If I'm working on a software project, if I'm writing strategy, whatever it is, I can do those days. Wednesdays are usually open. The reason why we're able to do this podcast here is because I just flew in from New York yesterday. So today was sort of an open day. But I try to be really diligent about how I chunk my time, because otherwise it can get really difficult to do quality, deep focused work if you're constantly jumping back and forth between different types of tasks.
You said something that really blew my mind on the Tim Ferriss podcast. You mentioned that the to-do list is endless. You can throw as much shit as you want at the to-do list, but the calendar is limited. Live off of the calendar. Like, that blew my mind. I went through my to-do list and I was like, holy shit, what can I actually accomplish here? Yeah. So how do you plan your week? I know you mentioned you do your meetings, but like, do you on Sunday, you're like, all right, this is what I'm going to, knock out? Like, are you working, are you doing like a quarterly where you have your main goal and you work backwards? Like, how do you do that when you're planning your weeks?
Yeah, I would say I often plan it pretty far out. So there are certain things that are just recurring. So I've helped a lot of people on our team doing capacity planning. I think really knowing what are your priorities and blocking time for those things in your week. In the simplest way, that's the way it goes. And I mentioned this on the other podcast, but the number of times that I've done this exercise with people on our team or friends of mine, where I say, all right, what are your priorities? What are you planning to get done this week? And they'll say, these are my 10 things that I'm going to do this week. Great. How many hours are each of those things going to take? And they say, well, each of them is going to take X number of hours. And we go on their calendar and we start adding it. And you can kind of abstractly fit it all in there. It's like, okay, but do you, eat lunch? It's like, yes. It's like, do you exercise? Yes. Do you do email? Yes. Do you have date night with your wife? Yes. It's like, okay, suddenly we have a lot less time available than you thought you did. And that they always end up feeling like the system is broken, because they're like, but I can't fit all of these things in my calendar. It's like, the calendar is not the problem. The problem is you have committed to doing too many things this week. It's quite literally impossible. There are not enough hours this week to do the things that you said you were going to do. And you can say, I'll just work more hours. There's still a constraint. There's about 120 hours available on a given week if all you do is work and sleep a full 8 hours. That's about how much time. That's the upper bound. Like the most I have ever averaged in terms of workload over the course of a month was about 110 hours a week, which I think was like June of 2020.
Damn.
Yep. That was me working until I fell asleep. And then I always tried to get 8 hours of sleep, and then I would wake up and I would work.
Wow. How do you manage your energy with that? Like, if you're busting out 110 hours or just even 80 hours, like, how do you not fall asleep in the middle of the day or like get fatigued? Then you just power through.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is working on things that I find interesting. Like most people, there are people who play video games for so long that they quite literally die of exhaustion. Right?
When I was younger.
Yeah, totally. Like, imagine if you could be that excited about what you're doing for work all the time. Wow. And that's what I try to optimize for. It's like, if you could just be maximally engaged and excited, like I try to get to the stage where I wake up in the morning and the first thing that I think about is like, wow, I can't wait to do what I have planned for today because it's so exciting and fun. And these things come in waves. Like there are times when I'm just not super motivated. And instead of feeling like something's wrong, you just kind of accept that sometimes it's really exciting. Right now, it happens to be really exciting. But 3 or 4 months ago, it really wasn't. And so I spent a lot of time. The level of excitement that I have for what I'm doing for work is almost inversely correlated to the number of books that I read. So like there are some books, I try to read at least 2 books a week, just in general. But sometimes I post this all monthly on Twitter of the books that I read. If you ever see a month where I read like 35 books, that's a sign. It's a sign that I'm not feeling super inspired, because it's just like,
do you stop what you're doing then, like work-wise? And I have a question I want to get to.
Yeah.
Do you just kill the momentum and just say, I'm not excited about it anymore, I'm going to stop? Or where do you end up on that?
Yeah, I have a pretty firm principle of I don't do things that I don't want to do. So if I can do it for a short sprint, it's like, all right, I've got to grit my teeth and I just got to grind through this. But there's an expiration on that. Like I'll do that I'm going to do this for 2 weeks. I remember a specific example where all of our orders, everything in our backend system was really duct taped together. And we had at this point several hundred customers. And I said, all right, we need to reconcile this and consolidate this into a database and a single source of truth. I'm going to grind for the next week or 2, and I'm going to manually reconcile all of these orders. And it took, I don't know, dozens of hours of just basically data entry. But I was one of the only people at the company who had enough context to be able to do that correctly. But I knew that it had an expiration. That's not going to be a thing that I do long term. And so I got it to a state where I could hand it off, where we didn't have to deal with it anymore. So when you're in sort of these ups and downs, when I'm not feeling super motivated, some of it's just like the challenge that we had recently was, this is not a challenge for the business. This is more like a personal challenge. I found that I'm much better as what I think Paul Graham calls a wartime CEO than a peacetime CEO. And things are feeling pretty peaceful. Like we have seemingly the right people in the right roles making the right decisions. And so I didn't really have a lot to do. And my calendar from all the travel that I had to do was kind of up in the air. And so I couldn't commit to a big coding project. So I was really, it's like, I guess I'll do email. And then you get to the bottom of your email and it's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. It's just like, I'm all right, I'm just going to read some books and I'm just going to relax. It's okay that I don't have any burning fires right now. And I should just
chill.
Just chill. Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
So I have 2 follow-up questions for you, and I'm also mindful of time. Do you have a hard out at the top of the hour? I want to be respectful.
Nope.
Okay. Fantastic.
Fire.
Hashtag not busy. Hashtag never busy.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hashtag Sam Corcos. When do you want to get up and out of here, Sam? So that way we have that in the back of our mind.
Whenever, no rush.
Fantastic, man. Well, that's
all right, bro. We're dropping a 3-hour podcast like Tim Ferriss.
All right, no. We're gonna Lex Friedman it, brother. We're gonna keep you here for at least 7. And so,
yeah.
One, there's also I'm an ex-athlete, so this mentality comes from that. There was a lady who was on the Rich Roll podcast a few years ago that said this really well. She called it the rule of thirds. She said 33% of the time you're going to love what you do, feel, exuberantly passionate about it. 33% of the time you're going to feel neutral toward it, and 33% of the time you're going to hate it. And she's like an Olympic sprinter or something, and she went to her coach. She goes, I hate it. I want to quit. And he was the one who taught her the rule of thirds. So to your point of the principle of not doing stuff that you don't like, my gut is that I go to that. I'm like, but there's a good chunk of stuff that even when you really like it, you don't. You have a lot of passion for it, but you don't feel it. And so what's your conversation around that?
Yeah, I think I understand the sentiment of the rule of thirds. I think there's an old saying, all models are wrong, some models are useful. So if
unbelievable, I love it.
Yeah, if the rule of thirds is useful and it helps you like realize, hey, it's actually not going to be fun all the time, then it is the correct model to use. Yeah. Sort of like the Eisenhower matrix is a model. Yeah. It is an incorrect model, but it can be useful. And if it's useful, then great. So I think it is useful in as much the rule of thirds concept is useful in as much as it reminds you, like, it's not always going to be fun. But you should try to get there and you should push through, because it's going to be fun at some point again, hopefully, assuming that you push through and like you've built it in such a way that it can. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes people find themselves in a situation where they've dug themselves in a hole, and sometimes they don't feel like they have agency to change things. Sometimes they actually don't. But even that statement, I think, is a mindset. Every day is a choice. You staying alive today is a choice that you're making. I'll give you a story. Maybe that's a good example here. So I have a CEO, founder friend of mine, who they have about 1,000 employees. So pretty decent sized company. And he'd been working on it for close to 10 years. For at least the 2 years prior to that conversation I had with him, was just every day he woke up, he would dread coming to work. Which wasn't always the case. Like he loved it for the first 5 years. And then over time, it just started grinding at him. He said the executive team meetings were like 70 people. And it was just like, there was so much politicking, and it was like every day was just dealing with people drama. And he started to really hate his job. And he just grit his teeth for about 2 years. And then at some point he went to his board and he just said, I can't do this anymore. I think it's time that we find another person to run this company. I'm just burnt out. I can't do this. I don't enjoy it anymore. I wake up every day dreading coming to work. And the board said, that's totally reasonable. You've been doing this for a long time. But before you do, can you just write down what changes you would need to see in order for you to continue to want to work here? And so he spent the next week writing down, like, I only want to do 3 meetings per week. I only want 5 direct reports. I never want to talk to these people again. it's like he just wrote down all these things, and then he brought it to the board, and they were like, what, do you feel like you need our permission? You're the CEO. What do you want from us? And he was like, wait, I can just do this whenever I want? It's like, yeah. So like the next day he announced this to the whole company, and there was a couple weeks where people's, feathers were ruffled. And then he enjoyed coming to work again. And he's like, why did I wait 2 years to do that? What on earth was I doing?
Oh, dude, that is such a money story. So I just want to over-index on this for 1 second. It doesn't sound, I just want to confirm what I'm hearing. It doesn't sound like you're the type of person, Sam, to just throw in the towel when it gets hard and difficult. It sounds like if what you're saying is, Nick, so long as I'm overall moving toward a life of enjoyment, I'm happy to live with the times. And I agree, it's probably not 33%. It's some number. The model's wrong, but the principles, It's useful. I'm fine to live with the shitty part. It's kind of like going to the gym. If you're doing squats, you don't like set.
Yeah, like for sure.
It sucks, but like I want to stay healthy. So I'm going to do it. And so is that what I'm hearing? And then, Okay, fantastic. But you're saying if it sucks for too long, make a change. I wasn't going to go here. I wanted to ask you how you take think tweaks, but now this is just such a perfect, bridge.
Yeah.
You told a story on the Palm podcast where you're talking about your co-founder, and basically the TLDR is that there was this big decision that the company had to make. You remember this, right? I mean, there's a big decision the company had to make. You were trying to toe the line and make the decision happen one way. Your co-founder chimed in, and he just threw everybody on a new direction. And you start to feel some resentment because you needed his buy-in, and he was, resurfacing old conversations. And then instantly, once, the meeting or the whatever was over, you just texted him. You said, hey man, can we talk? And you picked up the phone, and without failing, you just said, hey, I'm feeling, a little bit of resentment because here's X, here's Y. He ended up clearing it up. He was just like, hey man, I was in between like 9 different things. I replied really quickly. I had no context. And you were like, oh dude, wow, thank you. And the moral of the story was, dude, I could have held on to that. You said on the show, I could have held on to that for weeks and months and just stewed over it. And, in my head made you a really bad player. But it turned out it was super innocent and the fault was my own. And so I thought that was tremendously emotionally mature and, a high degree of emotional self-efficacy. And to me, that captures the idea of, hey, let's not react, let's respond to, life. I wanted to ask you, now all models are wrong. Do you have a model for hard conversations? And also, it was interesting to me how quick you decided to have it, because in my experience, I need to take some time away from it, because if I feel anger and resentment, I have a tendency to let that lead me in a conversation. I'm curious to know how you handle that. So 2 questions at once. How did you handle that emotion? And how did you, deal with the latency and the speed in which you had that conversation? And B, do you have a model or a framework that you use to have those difficult conversations? I'm curious because it sounded really emotionally mature.
The best one is the model from Nonviolent Communication. If you haven't read that book, it's definitely worth reading.
I started it.
I added it to my cart.
Yep.
I started it after listening to you on Tim Ferriss.
Yep.
Yeah.
Most people are really bad at explaining how they feel. It sounds like something every child should know how to do, but most adults do not know how to do this. I can give you some specific examples. There was a couple, some friends of mine who are married, and I'm friends with both of them. And they were having a real challenge in their marriage. And they both sort of independently asked me, like, what do I do? And I said, all right, let me just talk to both of you. And so I met with them, and I said to one of them, I'm going to try not to say their names. I went to the husband, and I said, okay, how do you feel? And he says, well, she does this, and she does that, and she does this. It's like, okay, those are not feelings. Those are things that she did that you're upset about. How do you feel? And he's like, oh, well, I feel like she does this and she does that. It's like, no, that's okay. We've got a ways to go here. And this sounds really silly to be able to just identify how you feel, but most of us can't do it. And a big part of nonviolent communication in these other tools is you have to separate the other person and what they did from how you feel. So it's not an accusation. It's not, you do all of these things wrong. It's like, I feel sad. We don't need to even talk about why I'm sad. That's just how I feel. And nobody can then say, like, I don't think you're sad. It's like, what do you mean you don't think I'm sad? I just told you I'm sad. It's not about them, it's about you. Make it about you, not about them. If you start accusing people, you're just going to turn this into an escalation. So a common one that I will frame with people on our team, this is like for work, but I think it's also helpful in all relationships really, is it's important to understand how you feel and what your needs are. So an example of a recent conversation with somebody who is now doing really well on our team, but there was a period where she was struggling. And I told her, what I need from you, I need to trust that you're going to do these things effectively. That's what I need. I'm not accusing her of saying, like, you did this, you did that, you're failing at all these things. I'm just saying, look, for me to feel confident in this role, I need to trust that you are doing these things. I think that the way that we might do that is by increasing our cadence of communication, by closing the loop better. But it's not about her. This is just about me. Like, I'm feeling with my co-founder, I didn't say, hey, you did all these things. I said, I'm starting to feel resentment. And I don't really know where this is coming from. I have some guesses, but I'm starting to feel resentment. And that's bad for me, and it's bad for you. If I'm feeling resentment towards you, that's also bad for you. So we should figure out where that's coming from. And we should figure out how to resolve that, because neither of us want that to be the case. Wow. So I think that's really the model. It's like, if you're finding yourself finger pointing and accusing the other person of doing things, you're already down the wrong path, because it's never about them. It's always the story that you tell yourself about what the other person is doing. It's really just about you and your own internal.
Dude, that's amazing, because now they can't even get defensive.
Omid, let me give Sam a compliment. because you're a philosopher, but you're a founder in disguise. You're like that. That's what I'm gathering from Sam. So far you've gone Matthew McConaughey and philosopher. And so we'll see how many new compliments we could give you. That's profound. What's step 2 though, by the way? Like, so I mean, you say I'm feeling this way. The next natural thing, how do you not go back into because you did this? You know?
Yeah, I think so. If you make it about yourself and it's not like an accusation of the other person.
Yeah.
We'll take the example with Josh.
Sure.
Just like, I'm feeling resentment. I'm not really sure why I'm feeling this. I'm feeling resentment towards you. And that's bad for both of us. You've now recruited this person as a teammate. And now he's going to say like, let's figure out why this is happening. And it's like, what was it that triggered it? I read this communication and it triggered me and made me start feeling resentment. I think it's for these reasons. And he says, oh, interesting, because I actually have been following along and I have context, and that's just a misunderstanding. It's like, oh, really? Wow. Okay. I didn't realize that. But you can imagine how different that would go if I said, hey, you keep sending these things and you never have context and you're just criticizing me for no reason. That's a very different conversation. It's like suddenly he feels defensive and now he has to defend himself because you just attacked him. You've accused him of doing something, which he didn't even do. So it's because it's all the story that you're telling yourself.
Wow.
Incredible.
Have you seen 8 Mile with Eminem?
I think I have a long time ago.
Like the way he wins the rap battle is he just raps about himself and not even about the other person. So he just took the power away from the other person by making it about himself. And I think it just goes to show like, when you bring it about yourself, they can't get defensive because you're saying, this is how I feel. That's very powerful. I mean, this works in regular relationships, even intimate relationships. I mean, my wife, she actually taught me this because she does this herself. She's always like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And I can't be like, well, fucking, you know? So yeah, that's wild just to hearing it come from a level of where you're at. So is this what you learned in nonviolent communication? Like this was your main takeaway from it? Wow. Fucking Nick, we got to read this shit ASAP.
I'll just be honest. I started reading it and it was just like, I was listening to the audio version. It was so boring. And I was like, maybe I got to not listen to the audio version and read it. I'm bad with reading books. Like, because I'm a podcast producer, I'm across a few different podcasts, Sam, and I have so much content that I consume because it's my job on, and I really love it. Like yesterday we had on Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I was 3 hours, and I listened to it twice. Like for context, that's a typical week for me. You're on mute, by the way, but maybe intentionally, but anyway,
I was burping.
No. That's okay.
I feel like you guys needed to hear that.
Burps are actually preferred on the show. But Omid, did you have a question for Sam?
Yeah. So kind of off of what you just said, Nick, actually, Sam, you mentioned that writing is a tool for thought. And I have been in the process of wanting to write more, but it's similar to Nick. I consume so much content and I feel like my mind runs at 1,000 miles an hour. And I don't know how to write in terms to process my thoughts. Like, I don't know if it's better for someone like myself to, thought dump with audio or to like do a video or actually write with hand or with like, the keyboard. How do you write to process your thoughts? Because it seems like everything you're mentioning, you've just been processing from your reading and life and, everything.
Yeah. I will typically open up a Notion doc and then I will just start writing. That's honestly the whole process. I think don't let writer's block stop you. If you look at the first draft of a lot of my strategy memos, you'll see a lot of lines in there like, I don't know what to write here. And then I'll just do like I'm literally just always writing what I'm thinking onto the page. And if you do that for long enough, eventually the thoughts will come. I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast with David, where I tried an experiment with my co-founder, Josh, where there is a mental and emotional hurdle to doing long form writing. Yeah. I don't totally know why there is, but there is. Somebody on our team was tasked with writing a strategy memo, and he'd been putting it off for, at that point, probably 2 or 3 months. And I said, you need to do it by the end of this week. That's the deadline. And he finally got around to writing it and took him 3 hours. And he was like, why was I delaying this for so long? It's like, for some reason,
it's like,
yeah. He's like, in my head, this was going to take weeks and it only took 3 hours. There's just this emotional burden to writing long form strategy or long form thoughts. But writing is usually pretty high density. I was alluding to this earlier. I did an experiment with my co-founder because even for me, the emotional burden of starting to write a memo is pretty high. And so I said, Josh, let's do this. Let's record a call where I'm just going to spitball ideas on this topic. And it was like, I don't know, an hour, maybe 2 hours times 2 people's time. It was a pretty big undertaking. And then we had that translated into a memo. And the entire thing had very little value. There were like a handful of points that if I had just spent 10 minutes writing, I would have done something way, way better. Just the amount of information that is conveyed in the spoken word, in like a casual way that we speak, is actually pretty low. There's a lot of spoken word is extremely lossy. And there's one, I can actually give you a really specific example of this. Like if you've ever been on the phone with somebody and their reception is like going in and out.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of weird that it's weird that I can still understand everything that they're saying. And I only get like every third word.
Yeah.
Because English, like spoken language is just really lossy. It's like they cut out for 30 seconds and I still know what they said somehow.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Other than the fact that it's annoying as hell, like it's.
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say, so how do you optimize for this? Then you open up a Notion doc. Are you doing this every night? Do you have prompts that you hit? Are you just doing it with inspiration hits? Like how do you optimize for your writing?
So I do a lot of them during my think weeks. Once a quarter, I try to block off a week to just write and think.
Shout out Bill Gates.
Yep. I largely stole the idea from him. Although I found that he likes to go by himself in the woods and read. I like to be with a group of people in a similar mind space and do a lot of writing. So similar intent, but I found that just for me, the best quality output tends to come from having other people who are also in the mental space of like, I want to deliver something. I want to do some deep work.
Have you been to Burning Man?
Yeah.
I feel like Burning Man is like definitely like a think week in a sense.
It's a think week in a sense. It's definitely different.
Did you go this year? I think it just finished.
No.
Cool.
No, I didn't go this year.
For thinking, ever since I saw that documentary, I've always wanted to do a think week. And I do this with vacations as well. Like I have a hard time saying, I'm going to take, this was one of my key questions, by the way, after this, I'm almost tapped. Like I have one fun one for you. Maybe Omid has one to give you like a read on time. How do you let go and just say, I'm going to take a week? Cause I mean, I heard you discuss this. I also know you have a process about it, which I want to read, available to the public, how you do think weeks. I will read that.
Oh, cool. You already have that. Great.
Yeah. But that being said, actually, if you could point me in the right direction, I'm not exactly sure where to find it.
I just thought, here we go. I have to create a channel, then invite you to it.
So strange. Yeah. How to think week. Okay, cool. Sick. Does this also answer, I haven't read this yet transparently, but does this also answer how to let go and actually decide that I'm going to take an official week off and I'm not going to check comms at work, et cetera? Okay. So how do you do that? Like, what's your process around that for vacations and for think weeks, et cetera?
Yeah. Vacation's an interesting term. What most people consider a vacation, which is like unplugging, going to the beach, not participating in anything work related. There's maybe another model of work-life balance. I think for me, it's not a useful model because for me, there isn't like this firm distinction between like, oh, what is my work and what is my life? For some people, there is. It's like they work 40 hours exactly per week. And then the minute that 5 o'clock happens, they are not working anymore. And now they are doing their life. and maybe they have a job to fund their adventures in heli skiing, whatever it is. Like that's what they like doing, and their work just is there to support that. There's no judgment one way or the other. It's just different people have different goals. So for me, there isn't this clear distinction. So for me, a vacation is spending a week writing strategy memos.
Yeah, which I agree with that. And even when I'm on a trip or something with friends, I actually enjoy tapping in because I really like what I do. But I guess the question still stands because I just call it a vacation or a trip. I don't want to get lost in the semantics. Think week. How do you fare with letting go for a week and not being super active on comms? Like that's a core of my question because sometimes that makes me a little bit nervous or anxious.
So some of it is just setting clear expectations. There's actually another story that I can give you. Somebody on our team.
I would love that.
Yeah. Somebody on our team. I won't name him.
Okay.
But incredible teammate. And he's doing really well. And I get a phone call. I get a text that says like, hey, are you free for a call? And I'm at Costco. And it's just like, yeah, sure. Sounds like, he needs me for something. He needs to maybe a time sensitive decision. And I pull up my phone. It's like, hey, what's up? He says, I have to resign. I'm burnt out. Like I've been working like 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like I'm not sleeping. It's like, I can't do this. I'm burnt out. And it was just complete. I was like, whoa, why? I had no idea. It's like, okay. I wouldn't have picked this up at Costco if I thought this was the conversation we were going to have, but let me get back to you. And he and I had a call later, and it was like, you don't have to work those hours. And he's like, but I'm checking my communications constantly because like, what if somebody needs me? It's like, don't. It's like, you can just not do that. You can say, look, you can set the expectation with people on your team. You can set SLAs of, hey, I'm going to check my communications once a day.
What's an SLA? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. A service level agreement. Okay. It's like for APIs. It's you're basically setting expectations for your team.
Sure.
You're saying, I'm going to check once per day. So whatever you send me, I will probably get back to it within 24 hours. That's just the default. If you need me sooner than that, text me. And he implemented that, and nobody texted him. And he's like, wait, I thought everybody needed me all the time. It's like, no, nobody ever needs you in a time-sensitive manner. There are very few things that are actually as time-sensitive and urgent. So if you were to say to your team, hey, I'm going to be offline for a week. If you need me, text me. I think you'll be surprised. The times when people on our team have done this, the frequency at which they receive a text message during that week is usually between 0 and 1 time. It's just, it is way less urgent than most people anticipate.
So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I just had one quick bridge off of that. You have I don't want to call it a weird way, but it's because it's not weird. It's a phenomenal way of answering questions because you give like really, I don't know how you recall these stories. Like it's so fascinating and it's so helpful. When you're on a metaphorical vacation or a think week and you set that boundary, hey, or you set that communication, that understanding with your team, I'm going to check, if you need me, text me, I'll check it once a week or something. Do you ever just say, fuck it, I'm going to check it more because I feel like it? Or are you pretty strict with yourself in that respect because you're trying to consciously make a think week happen? Or how does that work?
Yeah, I would say I really try to avoid checking the tools. And it's less for the team and it's more for my own mental space. I've noticed a lot of the memos that we have written at Level, some of our most important strategic memos tend to be clustered around the same week, and that's usually a think week. And the reason is when when you're in, as I think Cal Newport would call the hyperactive hive mind, when you're stuck in the trees and all you see is the task in front of you, it's really hard to think bigger picture and to think strategically, because you're thinking, how do I solve today's problem? I found that for me, quarterly is about the right cadence to zoom out and think, is this problem even worth solving? Are there other problems that are more important that we're not even thinking about? And it usually takes me, I would say, 2 to 3 days of being separated to start to think more holistically about what problems are worth solving. So that's why I try to detach from it, where if I started writing strategy memos and I was still in the day-to-day, I'd be thinking about what are the current things on our radar and how do we solve those more efficiently. If I give myself some space and I start to think more holistically, it's like, maybe we're thinking about this whole business the wrong way. Maybe we should be thinking about these other things that are not even on our radar. Maybe we need to pivot a major part of our product's functionality to this other thing that we're not currently working on. The only way you can get that space is to make it. So that's the big reason why I try to avoid it.
Wow. It's an amazing answer. Omid? I literally go ahead. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, dude, I feel like my bachelor party was kind of like a think week. I mean,
no,
I just got
no,
bro. I mean, that shit was
it really was a think week.
That shit was a straight men's retreat, bro. Talking goals, goal setting, just zooming out together with the boys. I definitely feel like that was kind of a think week, being all together. We didn't write anything down, but it was very productive.
I'm just busting your balls. My only concern is whether or not I'm going to have an overthink week, because I feel like I have a tendency to overthink things. Like, I wonder, do you just know quarterly that, hey, this is like a good time for me to spend a week thinking about strategy? Because it feels like sometimes it's actually better to just not touch it.
There is some frequency at which it is important to think more holistically about your priorities, be it in life, be it in work. There's an interesting another observation that I've had for myself, which is that almost every mistake that I have made was an error of omission rather than an error of commission over the last 10 years. It was rarely a decision that I made that was the problem. It was a decision that I did not make, or a decision that I should have made but didn't see because I wasn't paying enough attention. So giving yourself that space is really important. And something that's another maybe data point that's worth maybe for you to reflect on is I religiously keep track of how I spend my time. And I spend less than 5% of my time on strategy. And I probably have written more strategy memos than any other CEO that I know. And I'm only spending 5% of my time on strategy, which means most people are probably spending 1%, maybe less, maybe like 0.5% on strategy, which is really the most important thing that they could be doing. So there's some amount of time that I think is useful to dedicate to. I'll give you another example. I was talking to my co-founder about this on why it's so important for me to do Think Weeks. Our team's about 40 people, which means every week that we go in the wrong direction is a year of labor that goes into this project. Think of it that way. Every week that I make a bad decision, I've wasted a year of human effort.
Wow.
There's a lot of responsibility there. So when you think about, especially as you delegate and as you have more people on your team, if you have the wrong strategy for like a quarter, you've wasted basically an entire human's career on just not making the right decision.
Wow.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Profound.
Yeah. Dude, you've emphasized quarterly quite a few times on this call. I'm curious, when you're looking at your trajectory on a quarterly basis, I've heard from many, and I know no good model. There's no such thing as a good model.
Yep.
But I've heard a model where it is you want to focus on your inputs because you can't control your outputs. But I also feel like if you're trying to accomplish something, aren't you setting your quarterly goals based on outputs from your inputs? Like, how do you go ahead and actually plan your quarterly goals?
So I think part of the answer when it comes to strategy and think weeks, I don't come in knowing what the answer is. And there are several strategy memos that have come out of think weeks that profoundly changed the trajectory of our company.
Wow.
So something that's and that probably would not have happened, or at a minimum would have happened months later. And keep in mind, months later means many, many, many years of labor going into a thing in the wrong direction, which you then have to spend years of labor undoing those things just before you can even start making forward progress. So there's no correct cadence. I have just found for me at the current stage of our company, quarterly is the right balance of I can do a week a quarter, I can think about it, and then I can spend the rest of that quarter executing on that strategy. Mm-hmm. And make forward progress. If all you're doing is spending your time pontificating and theorizing and strategizing, you're not going to make forward progress. So you have to do something. But there's a common term that people use, which is velocity. Yeah. If you want to have high velocity, the interesting thing that is often missed in the term velocity is that velocity is just a definition in physics. Velocity is not how fast you're moving. Velocity, by definition, is speed in a direction. That's just the physics definition. And everyone seems to think velocity is just how fast you're going. But if you're going very fast in the wrong direction, you do not have high velocity. In fact, you have very low velocity.
Wow. That's profound. That
is profound. I have a fun question to wrap it up. Maybe it's fun. Maybe it's fun, actually, because it's case specific. I love Andreessen Horowitz. I love their fund. I love their content. I love Mark. Whenever he talks, I listen for the most part. You mentioned that he sat in on one of your all hands.
Yeah.
How did that happen? I've never ever heard in my life. Like maybe I'm just out to lunch, but I've never heard in my life of a VC coming to an all hands. What was that like? How did that come to be? Did you ask him to be there? Did he ask to be there? Was it a fun story, or is it actually a terrible story?
I mean, we invited him on. We often have special guests on our team all hands. Sometimes it's Levels members, people who use our product and have feedback, either positive or negative. And sometimes it's our investors. Sometimes it's just like a celebrity guest appearance of somebody who's really interested in health and wellness.
Nick and Omid.
Exactly.
We would have literally nothing of value to give your team. We would just ask you questions in front of the team the whole time. We'd be like, Sam, here's a list of questions we forgot to ask.
And we really wanted him to like give some feedback and some maybe validation on team and culture, because we're doing things in kind of an unusual way. And he said something that was really interesting on that call, which was, he was saying how we've been fully remote from day one, which in some ways makes us very unusual, because a lot of teams just went remote during COVID, and they're trying to shim new remote expectations on a company that's used to working co-located. So they just sit on Zoom calls all day, and it's just the worst of all worlds. We've been remote from day one. So when COVID happened, like I remember at a certain point, we all got on a call when our team was maybe 12 people, maybe 10 people. And we were like, are we missing something, or has nothing changed for us? Like, I feel like everyone we know is like hair is on fire. Everything's super hard at work. And it feels like everything's the same for us. And it's like, I mean, we started remote. So it's just nothing. It's all kind of the same. So I think the only productivity loss we had was one person on our team had to relocate last minute and lost like a few days of work, but it wasn't really a lot. So he gave us some interesting feedback on like why these things are good and it's worth exploring these new areas. But the specific thing that he said that was really interesting was at the end of the day, the correct culture is the one that wins. Like you can self-congratulate for having a great culture, But if you lose, that was the wrong culture.
Wow.
At the end of the day, your culture needs to win. And if you don't have the winning culture, then you have the wrong culture. So at the time he said it, I didn't really understand it. But now I think I have a much greater appreciation for that, because not the culture that you choose for your company does not necessarily translate into every scenario. And so you have to pick the right mode of operating based on the types of problems that you're going to solve.
Another fucking banger from Sam Corcos. Like, unbelievable, man. By the way, when is Levels coming to Canada? I went to actually ordered a little bit ago.
Yeah.
I'm dying to try it. I'm like against other CGM companies.
Yeah.
I'm like oddly loyal to you guys ever since we've done work together. And your brand is the tightest by far. All the other ones make me literally feel like I'm using like a medical device, which I am. Do you have a roadmap on that? Is that in the...
Yeah, it's on our list. It's probably early next year.
Ooh.
A lot of it's going to depend on the hardware more than anything.
Why is that?
Just because they are medical devices, and so getting the logistics of digital services are really easy across borders. The logistics of physical products are a lot harder across international borders.
Oh, interesting.
So
I forgot that a CGM is technically classified as a medical device, which opens up a lot of scrutiny. Well,
yeah, even if it wasn't, it's still like it's really easy if you start a software company to just say like, all right, we're available in like, I don't know, Indonesia today.
Yeah.
But if you have even like shoes and you want to sell them in Indonesia, it's like, all right, we need to find a distribution partner in Indonesia. We have to figure out what our import and tariffs situation is. Like there's so much more complexity when you're dealing with atoms. So that's a different topic.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't wait. I really can. I'll be one of your first customers out here, and I'm happy to test dummy it. If you're like, we need somebody in Canada on the ground that needs to like order this 10 times to make sure that we have it right.
Great.
Let me know and I'll do it for you. Sam, where can people find you? I know you're on X and I know that the company's levels.com. Is that right? Or join Levels Health, or what is it?
Levels.com.
Okay. Levels.com. And where can folks find you?
Probably, Twitter, X.
Cool.
Just at Sam Corcos.
Sounds good. Sam, that's the pod. Thanks so much for being on. Do you want to hang out for 2 seconds? I just want to make sure your follow-up looks cool. All right. See you guys.